Today, you're going to hear a true story, so absurd, it feels like a lie. A story that defies the logic of time, politics, and even history itself. A republic that existed for only a single day. And in that brief moment, it even had a president. It may sound strange, almost like a strange dream, but here, at Verdade Sonolenta, the strange is our invitation to a deep and tranquil journey. So, make yourself comfortable. Take a deep breath. Let your mind slowly drift as I tell you this nearly forgotten chapter, where the unexpected and the real blend together. Humanity, from time to time, writes such peculiar pages that they seem to come from a surreal tale. It is in these moments, brief, fleeting moments, that history reveals its most curious mysteries. Stories that most people will never hear or even imagine. Stories like the Republic that lasted just a single day, an episode that challenges our notions of time and permanence. Imagine a nation, a land, a people, determined to try what many desired but few dared to pursue. A moment of sovereignty, of autonomy, that was as brief as a blink of an eye. A gentle breath that barely touched the air before vanishing. And yet, for that fleeting moment, a republic truly existed. With its own flag, its own president, its own decisions. It's not a story you'll find in the big chapters of school books or in the official chronicles of capital cities. It's a secret, whispered by those who enjoy digging deep into the chest of forgotten facts. One of those episodes that remind us that, sometimes, reality can be more curious, more bizarre, and even more fantastic than our most vivid dreams. Over the next few moments, I invite you to slow down, to let your mind settle into the calm rhythm of this tale, to understand, without rushing, how a people can be moved by a unique, almost poetic impulse for change and self-rule, even if just for one day. Close your eyes, if you'd like. Picture the sunrise over a land that, for a brief moment, placed itself on the map as something new, something of its own. Feel the calm air of that morning, the light, almost ethereal energy of hope, of revolution, wrapped into just a few hours. And then, imagine the singular figure who accepted the challenge of leading this fleeting republic, its president. What might have been his thoughts? His doubts, his fears? What decisions would he make, knowing that time was already slipping through his fingers? It's a quiet exercise in imagination and reflection, an invitation to perceive both the fragility and the weight history can carry. This story is a gentle reminder that time, power, and the very existence of something as grand as a republic can be ephemeral, that even the most solid things may be as fleeting as the wind brushing through the leaves. Perhaps, as you listen to this tale, you'll begin to see that life, history, and even dreams walk side by side, on lines so delicate they sometimes blur, that the strange and the unexpected are what keep us awake, even when we wish to close our eyes and rest. Here at Verdade Sonolenta, each story is a bridge between reality and dreaming, between curiosity and depth. A quiet invitation to journey through these landscapes where the impossible seems to happen, even if only for a moment. So prepare yourself for this journey, a story that lasts only a day, and yet feels suspended in time. A true story, so absurd, it feels like a lie. But I assure you, It's more real than most could ever imagine. Before we dive into the strange and fleeting phenomenon of the Republic that lasted only a single day, it's important to pause and take a look around at the setting in which this unexpected event unfolded. Like every story, this one didn't emerge from nowhere, but from a tangle of circumstances, desires, and tensions that had been slowly simmering in a very specific time and place. Imagine a period of uncertainty where old regimes begin to tremble and aspirations for change start to grow among different groups. A moment of transition when the past no longer satisfies, but the future remains an unknown territory, almost a thin mist hovering on the horizon. Human history is full of such moments, quiet pauses between what has been and what is yet to come. And it is within one of these pauses that our story takes shape. At that time, the region where this ephemeral republic emerged was marked by deep political and social tensions. There was a growing desire for autonomy, for a voice of its own, one that wouldn't be lost in distant hierarchies or buried under foreign impositions. People were tired of centralized control, of rules that seemed to forget their daily lives, their needs, and their dreams. The world around them wasn't still either. Elsewhere, republics were being established, empires were weakening, and new ideas of governance were spreading with renewed force. The winds of change were blowing, bringing with them promises of freedom, but also uncertainty, conflict, and doubt. In this charged atmosphere, a small group decided they could wait no longer. They chose to act, boldly and immediately, to create a new space where they could attempt a different kind of government, a political experiment, if you will, but one that, due to both internal and external circumstances, would last only a single day. It's important to understand that this was not merely an impulsive act or a fleeting whim. It was a gesture filled with meaning, a sincere attempt at change, even if short-lived. Behind the founding of that republic was the hope that something new could take root there, a seed of transformation for the future. But like all fragile beginnings, that moment was filled with doubts. Who could lead a republic that was born already knowing its time would be short? How could one build institutions, draft laws, or ensure order when the clock was already counting down against the very idea? And more importantly, how would the people react? Was there excitement, fear, skepticism? Would daily life adapt to welcome this change, or would the population remain indifferent, perhaps even wary? This story invites us to contemplate the complexity of social and political transformations, especially those that arise during turbulent times. Because not all change is swift or permanent. Some appear in small gestures, in single days, in moments that seem too brief to matter, and yet they leave their mark. It is in this delicate dance between the old and the new, between hope and hesitation, that the one-day republic emerges as a curiosity that transcends its own time. A quiet reminder that ideas and dreams, however brief, hold the power to stir the course of history. As you listen to this story, allow yourself to feel the stillness of that ancient time, the hush that comes before great changes. Let the scene unfold gently, like a painting that reveals itself slowly before your eyes. Breathe deeply. Let your mind rest in this space where past and present meet, where history becomes an invitation to reflection, and little by little, begin to sense the presence of that singular day that, though brief, held a promise of something different for its people. Now, we prepare to meet the protagonists of this story, the people who brought life to this fleeting republic, who embraced the challenge of leading something ephemeral, yet no less meaningful. Because every story needs characters, and this one, especially, is marked by those who, for a few short hours, carried the weight of an entire republic on their shoulders. Before we can understand the details of what happened on that singular day, we need to try to grasp what motivated those people to make such a bold decision, to create a republic that they knew would last only for a moment. What was the feeling, the need, the impulse that led them to that choice? At its core, every political change is born from a deep desire, the desire to belong, to be seen, to exist under a new light. Those people at that time were immersed in a complex mixture of dissatisfaction and hope. Dissatisfaction with the structures that governed them, distant, indifferent, and hope that something different, even if small, could emerge. This movement wasn't merely a cry of revolt, but also a delicate, almost poetic attempt to reaffirm a sense of identity. It was a symbolic act, perhaps even a collective dream, that they could have control over their destiny, even if only for a brief moment. Sometimes, amid uncertainty and crisis, people reach for gestures that may seem small but carry enormous meaning. The creation of the one-day republic was exactly that, a gesture filled with symbolism, a sincere attempt to touch something new, even if only for a fleeting moment. That gesture can be seen as a response to years of oppression, of decisions made elsewhere, far from their daily reality. It was an invitation to breathe in a bit of freedom, to try out a different way of governance, where the voice of the people might finally be heard. But there was also a sense of urgency, the awareness that the time to act was short, that the moment to try something new could not be postponed. Perhaps that's why the Republic lasted only one day, because even knowing its fragility, those who created it chose to live each moment as if it were eternal. At its heart, this story invites us to reflect on the strength of small acts, how even the simplest gesture of autonomy can illuminate paths that once seemed unreachable, and also on the fragility of dreams, which sometimes must take shelter in brief moments just to survive. As you listen, let this thought gently float through your mind, that sometimes the greatest courage lies in simply trying, even if only for one day, to take hold of your own destiny. Every story, no matter how unusual, needs people, human beings who, with their doubts, fears, and courage, bring events to life. In the Republic that lasted only one day, it was no different. Behind that brief moment of autonomy stood a singular group of protagonists, individuals who accepted the challenge of being part of something fleeting, yet meaningful. Imagine ordinary people, some perhaps unknown beyond their local communities, who suddenly found themselves at the center of a political and social experiment. These were people with their own stories, their own dreams, and a certain restlessness about the world around them. They were not immortal heroes or legendary figures. They were human, with all the contradictions that come with that. Among these protagonists, one central figure stood out, the president of that one-day republic. A man or woman who, even knowing their time in power would be brief, stepped into the role with a serenity that felt almost poetic. What thoughts might have crossed their mind in that moment? What sensations moved within them as they made decisions, knowing it would all soon come to an end. Beyond the president, there were advisors, local leaders, representatives of the people who took part in creating this unique moment. Together, they formed a delicate network of support, a small structure that tried to give shape to a government that barely had time to breathe. Perhaps for many of them, that day was a blend of hope and fear. Hope for building something new, however fragile. Fear of the unknown, of the consequences, of what might follow. What fascinates us about these protagonists is not just what they did, but the courage they had to do it. The courage to try something new, to challenge what was considered normal, even knowing that history might forget them. These individuals remind us that behind both great and humble events are real people, with real feelings. People who often fade into the vastness of time, but who, for a brief moment, burned brightly, leaving behind an invisible yet lingering trace. As you listen to this story, imagine their faces, their hands, their hearts beating fast on that day. Feel the calm, mingled with the intensity of those who dared to leap toward a dream, even a short-lived one. And remember, every story of change begins with people, big and small, who accept the challenge of trying. The sun that morning rose shyly, painting the sky in soft hues, as if it too hesitated before what was about to unfold. It was a day like so many others, yet for those who were there, it carried a quiet, almost sacred importance. The morning of the founding of the Republic, the one that would last only a single day, began wrapped in a light atmosphere, yet one heavy with meaning. Imagine calm streets, perhaps a bit more alive than usual, with people exchanging curious glances and quiet whispers. News of the Republic's creation was still spreading slowly, while leaders and locals gathered in a place that, for a few hours, would become the heart of this new nation. It was a simple gathering, far from the grand official ceremonies we might expect. There were no roaring crowds, no thunderous applause. Instead, there was a kind of reverent stillness, as if every movement, every gesture, was touched by respect and care for that singular moment. The president was announced, not as a conqueror, but as someone who stepped into a symbolic role, fully aware of the short life this project would have. His face reflected both responsibility and a deep calm, as if he knew this day would be both fleeting and eternal, a memory forever etched into the minds of those who took part. Words were spoken, few and carefully chosen, each one carrying more weight than it might seem. Promises of respect, of unity, of hope for an uncertain future. There was no rush. Everything happened in the gentle rhythm of the morning as it quietly unfolded. Meanwhile, people nearby watched, some with doubt, others with a spark of curiosity in their eyes. It was a moment of silent expectation and reflection, an invitation to imagine possibilities that had once seemed far away. That morning marked the beginning of something rare, a moment suspended in time, an attempt to create a space where freedom could be tasted, even if only for a few hours. And so, as the sky opened and the day began to take shape, that republic was born. Not with the crash of thunder, but with the softness of a breeze that brushes the face and soothes the soul. When someone takes on the leadership of a new country, even if that country exists only for a brief moment, their actions and words carry immense weight. A burden that seems to transcend the boundaries of time and space. And on that day, when the Republic was born, Its president carried out his first act with the calm and serenity of someone who knows everything is unfolding in a delicate balance between dream and reality. Imagine the respectful silence that filled the air as he rose, a little hesitant, yet steady. His gaze was calm, as if he were contemplating not only the people around him but the future itself. A future that, in that moment, was as uncertain as the wind passing through open windows. His first gesture was simple, almost symbolic, yet full of meaning: the signing of a document that proclaimed the existence of the Republic. Words carefully chosen, not meant to impress, but to affirm a collective will, a shared desire that had bloomed on that day. He spoke, not with the loud voice of a tyrant, but with the gentle tone of someone inviting quiet reflection. His speech didn't promise perfect worlds or miraculous change. On the contrary, it acknowledged the fragility of the moment, the fleeting nature of that government. And yet, it invited everyone to believe in the strength of the act itself, however brief it might be. What we do today, he said, is not just a change of name or rules. It is a gesture of courage, of hope. A small flame that, even if extinguished tomorrow, might spark others in days to come. As his words echoed through the space, the atmosphere seemed to settle, as if time itself had chosen to slow down just to absorb that message. The president knew his role was not that of a conqueror, but a temporary guardian, someone holding in his hands the delicate responsibility of a fragile dream. After that first act, other decisions were made, all of them seeking to give meaning and structure to the republic that had just come into being. Simple laws, agreements of coexistence, symbols to represent this new identity. All of it carried out with the tenderness of someone who understands that what matters most is not how long something lasts, but what it means. And so, on that day that seemed to stand still, the president guided his republic, not with the harshness of a regime, but with the tenderness of a father gently lulling his child to sleep, knowing that morning will bring change. In the almost sacred stillness of that day, as the short-lived republic began to unfold, a question lingered in the air. How does a government function when it is born knowing its time is so brief? How do you organize the machinery of power, establish rules, and maintain some kind of order when the clock is already ticking against your very existence? The government of this republic was, in many ways, a delicate construction, meant more to serve a symbolic purpose than a practical one. Even so, there was a need to build a structure, however simple, so that this experiment could carry some semblance of meaning. Instead of complex institutions, there were small decision-making groups, built on trust and consensus. People who knew their communities, their customs, and who stepped into roles of leadership not out of vanity, but out of a quiet commitment to the idea of autonomy. The administration of that day was guided by short meetings, careful conversations, where every voice had its place. Urgency was set aside in favor of slow reflection, as if time itself could be bent, stretched, to fit within that single day. The decisions made focused on the common good, basic guarantees of coexistence, mutual respect, the maintenance of order without force. There were no grand reforms or imposed decrees. It was more a gesture of collective care than a quest for revolution. The law, when it was proclaimed, reflected that same simplicity. Clear, yet flexible norms that left room for adaptation and dialogue. It was a code of coexistence written to embrace diversity, to welcome differences, and, above all, to preserve peace. The greatest symbol of that republic may have been cooperation, a quiet understanding that everyone was responsible for that moment, for that day slipping gently away. In this calm and almost informal functioning, the republic became a microcosm of what governance could look like when based on empathy and solidarity. A delicate experiment that makes us reflect on what truly matters when we talk about leadership and power. As you listen to this story, picture those people gathered together, speaking in soft voices, exchanging ideas with respect and patience. Feel the tranquility of a government that doesn't rush, that knows its time is short, yet still wants to be fair and welcoming. It's a gentle reminder that power doesn't always need to be a crushing force. Sometimes it can be an act of care and attention, even if only for one day. As the new republic began to take its first steps on that brief day, the reaction of the population was not long in coming, though it came wrapped in a subtle mixture of emotions, ranging from quiet curiosity to measured skepticism. It was a moment of restrained surprise, where each individual seemed to reflect, at their own pace, on what it meant to be part of that unique experiment. Imagine streets and squares where glances met without hurry, where conversations formed in small groups, almost like whispers spreading news both strange and fascinating. Some welcomed the novelty with a timid sparkle in their eyes, a discreet desire for change, a silent hope that, perhaps, something better could be born there. Others, however, kept their doubts hidden in their gestures, weighing the real impact of that brief government, questioning its legitimacy and purpose. For many, the idea of a republic lasting only one day seemed like a fleeting dream, a fantasy that would soon vanish with the setting sun. And there were those who remained indifferent, absorbed in their daily routines, letting time pass without great expectations. For them, that ephemeral republic was just another strange chapter in a book that is not always easy to understand. Despite these differences, a common thread united these reactions. The feeling that they were witnessing something unique, a moment that, even if brief, deserved attention and respect. It was an invitation to rethink one's place in history, to question what it means to be governed and to govern. In this scenario, silence often spoke louder than words. A silence full of possibilities, a space where everyone could imagine their role in that experiment. And as the day progressed, the people began to realize that this republic was not merely a political act, but a human gesture, a reflection of the anxieties and hopes everyone carried within them. As you listen to this story, allow yourself to feel that calm and tension, that blend of doubt and expectation that only those who lived that day can fully understand. It's a gentle reminder that, however fleeting a change may be, it always touches, even if just lightly, the hearts of people. As that ephemeral republic took shape in its single day of life, beyond its local borders, the world watched with a mixture of surprise, caution, and even a touch of disdain. The international community, accustomed to republics that were stable, lasting, and robust, viewed this brief experiment with curiosity, almost like a political breath that seemed to defy the usual rules of the game between nations. Imagine distant offices where diplomats read the news with raised eyebrows, debating what this singular event might mean. Some saw it merely as a curiosity, an anecdote worthy of being recorded in history books, a fragile experiment doomed to fail from the start. Others, however, took it more seriously. For neighboring countries, the founding of that republic, even if temporary, stirred unease. Could this small gesture trigger greater instability? Would it set a dangerous precedent for other dissatisfied regions? The fear of political contagion whispered in the shadows of international meetings. Some external powers chose to keep their distance, adopting the stance of silent observers, while others tried to send veiled diplomatic messages, sometimes cautiously supportive, sometimes discreetly warning. After all, recognizing a republic that existed for only one day seemed as absurd as it was contradictory. Curiously, even in its brevity, the republic managed to attract attention, a reminder that politics sometimes expresses itself not only through lasting power but also through brief gestures, fleeting symbols that challenge stability. This external reaction added an extra layer of complexity to the already delicate local experiment. Pressures, doubts, and questions passed through the day as the leaders of that republic tried to balance the need for autonomy with the delicate diplomatic dance. And so, as you listen to this story, imagine distant voices, whispers, and debates crossing borders, while the world tried to make sense of something as fleeting as a one-day republic. It is an invitation to reflect on how time and duration do not always define the importance of an event, and how the strange sometimes echoes far beyond what we might imagine. Even within the brief span of a single day, governing a republic, albeit ephemeral, was no simple task. Beneath the apparent calm of that delicate moment, silent tensions and challenges slowly unfolded, like soft shadows accompanying the morning light. Imagine the Republic's protagonists gathered together, trying to balance the urgency of action with the serenity needed not to rush the very time they had. Perhaps the greatest challenge was dealing with the project's ephemerality, governing while knowing that everything would end before decisions could be fully implemented. This awareness brought inevitable doubts. Was it worth investing energy in laws that would last only hours? How to ensure respect and order within such a fragile structure? How to guarantee that the spirit of that republic would survive, even if its body was fleeting? Moreover, the local political environment, already marked by disputes and uncertainties, left little room for full calm. Silent resistance arose, not always open but present. They had to face those who saw the one-day republic as a threat or mere whim. Another important challenge was communication. How to keep the population informed, engaged, and secure when news spread slowly and not everyone understood the nature of this experiment. The risk of misunderstandings was great, and with it, the danger of distrust or even panic. There was also the challenge of time. The clock relentlessly ticked while acts needed to be decided, documents signed, responsibilities assumed. It was a delicate dance where every step had to be calculated to avoid precipitating the end before its time. Amid all this, the personal responsibility of the leaders weighed heavily. The president and his advisors needed to find balance between action and patience, between hope and realism. Serenity became, perhaps, the most valuable tool amidst the whirlwind. This set of challenges, though silent, gave that day an unexpected depth. It wasn't merely a symbolic act, but a moment filled with real tensions where every decision, however small, echoed through the delicate structure of the Republic. As you listen, allow yourself to feel that calm tension, that silent struggle between fragility and strength that permeated that unique day. It's a reminder that even in the briefest moments, governing is a complex exercise, one that requires not only authority but also wisdom and humility. Amid the seriousness of what was happening, the day of that fleeting republic was also marked by small moments of lightness, almost invisible instances that, in the calmness of history, gain a special importance. It is these little stories, almost whispered by time, that help us feel the humanity of the protagonists and the texture of the day lived. Imagine, for example, a group of residents who, amid discussions about laws and decrees, paused to watch the sky, as if seeking a sign of approval in the clouds. Or the shy smile of a child who, upon hearing about the Republic, imagined castles and adventures, bringing a touch of dreaminess to such a concrete event. There are accounts, though unofficial, of unexpected encounters, neighbors who reunited after years, old rivals who, that morning, exchanged a nod of respect, as if the novelty had created a brief space for reconciliation. And there are also curious stories about small mistakes and stumbles. The president, during his speech, hesitated when pronouncing the official name of the Republic, causing discreet smiles among those present, an improvised flag that, for a moment, was carried by the wind before being firmly fixed. These details, as simple as they may seem, bring a delicate humanity to an event that could have been just a dry and distant political fact. They remind us that even in historic moments, there is room for laughter, surprise, and the unexpected. As you listen, try to visualize these small gestures, those almost forgotten moments that help paint the full picture of that day. Feel the tranquility and charm that come from these nuances, which transform the story into something tangible, something that touched hearts and minds. It is these small lights that illuminate history, making it alive and close, even when the republic that sheltered them lasted only a single day. In a time when news still traveled slowly, crossing dusty roads and whispered voices, communication about that one-day republic took on a delicate and essential role. The media, in its simple and limited forms, became the thread that connected the fleeting event to the minds and hearts of the people, a bridge between what was happening and what was perceived. Imagine handwritten newspapers, carefully distributed pamphlets, and conversations spreading by word of mouth, carrying both facts and interpretations, doubts and hopes. Every printed or spoken word was like a drop of ink, helping to paint the image of that fleeting republic. The local press bore the responsibility of translating the meaning of that day to the population, a delicate task, as it required balancing enthusiasm for the new with caution in the face of uncertainty. Some reports praised the courage of the leaders. Others, more skeptical, questioned the viability of such a brief government. Moreover, communication also served to create a sense of belonging, to unite people around that experience, however temporary. Through words, even simple ones, the Republic gained life in the imagination and feelings of each individual. But not everything was calm. The challenge of communication also included the risk of misinformation and misunderstandings, which could create confusion and fear. Careful handling of the message was a silent priority for those who held the power to communicate. This network of communication, modest as it was, helped to weave the social fabric of that day, connecting distant people, uniting scattered voices, and creating a collective memory that, brief as it was, would endure through time. As you listen to this story, allow yourself to feel the importance of this collective whisper, this bridge made of words and gestures that keeps the essence of a unique moment alive. And remember, even the simplest gestures, like a shared piece of news, can carry the weight of history and the power to transform realities. Even knowing its time would be brief, the one-day republic was not content with just symbols or words. At the heart of that ephemeral day, some concrete changes tried to bloom. Small actions that, however fleeting, carried the desire to mark something real, something that could touch people's lives, even if only for a moment. Imagine simple but meaningful decisions, guarantees of freedom to express opinions, promises of respect for local traditions, agreements to improve coexistence among different groups. These were acts that wouldn't change the world immediately, but that lit small sparks of hope. These changes did not come accompanied by grand reforms or deep revolutions. On the contrary, the focus was on what could be achieved in a few hours: gestures of care, justice, mutual recognition. It was like planting seeds in fragile soil, trusting that, even if the day ended, something could sprout in the future. Some of these decisions directly influenced daily life: commitments to safety, basic health, and education within communities. These were steps that tried to show that a government, even temporary, can care and act for the common good. It's possible that for many, these changes seemed small, almost imperceptible. But when we look closely, we realize that even the smallest gesture can carry enormous meaning, especially in a moment when everything seemed about to disappear. And as the Republic moved toward its end, these actions left a delicate mark, a gentle reminder that even the ephemeral can be concrete. As you listen to this story, imagine these changes unfolding slowly, like a whisper in time. Feel the calm and hope that come from these small steps, revealing the power of action, even when the future seems uncertain. This episode invites us to think that true change does not always need to be swift or lasting to be valuable. Sometimes, it manifests in discreet gestures, in unique days, in moments kept close to the heart. As the day came to an end, the sky began to paint itself with soft and delicate colors, announcing the sunset, a silent and serene spectacle that seemed to reflect the fleeting nature of that republic that had existed for only a few hours. It was as if the horizon itself bid farewell with a palette of warm tones, in reverence to a unique and brief experiment. Imagine the now calmer streets. The inhabitants stepped slower as they looked up at the sky, aware that the day of autonomy was drawing to a close. A mixed feeling of melancholy and peace hung in the air, as if time slowed down to allow for one last contemplation. At that moment, small rituals were carried out to symbolize the closing of that journey. The president, with the serenity of someone who knows tomorrow will be different, gathered the few who remained and gave a farewell speech, not with words of sadness, but with a calmness that comforted. Today we planted a seed, however small, a gesture of courage and hope that lives within each of us. Tomorrow, history will follow its course, but this day will never be forgotten. Some present exchanged silent glances, understanding the importance of that moment. The Republic's flag was carefully taken down, not as a defeated symbol, but as a promise kept for the future. The sunset thus became the last act of this brief republic, a moment that united past and future, hope and reality, dream and wakefulness. The soft light fading on the horizon seemed to cradle the dream of that ephemeral day, preparing it for rest and for rebirth in memories. As you listen, allow yourself to feel this final calm, this silence loaded with meaning. Imagine the sky dyed orange and gold as the Republic slowly says goodbye, like a shooting star crossing the firmament to leave its eternal shine. And so, the day ends, but the story, that continues to live within those who listen. When the sun disappeared on the horizon and the day came to an end, the Republic that lasted only a few hours also dissolved, returning the territory and its people to what they called normality. But what exactly happened afterward? How did the people, the authorities, and the world react to this gesture so brief, yet full of meaning? The return to the previous situation was neither an immediate shock nor an abrupt takeover. There was a kind of calm, as if time itself wanted to allow a breath, a moment of reflection on what that day had represented. People quietly kept the memories, the feelings, and the hopes that blossomed in that ephemerality. Some local leaders continued to nurture the idea, albeit discreetly, that the seed could one day sprout again. Others preferred to forget, treating the episode as a small anecdote, an experiment never to be repeated. On the side of the authorities who regained control, attitudes ranged from tolerance to silent repression. For some, the one-day republic was just a harmless curiosity. For others, a latent threat, a dangerous reminder that the desire for autonomy could resurface. On the international stage, the episode was quickly forgotten, swallowed by bigger news and longer-lasting events. But for those who lived that moment, the memory remained alive, an invisible thread connecting past and future. This return to normality paradoxically created space for questioning, an invitation to think about what it means to govern, about the fragility of political structures, and about the human capacity to dream and act, even if only for brief moments. As you listen, allow yourself to feel this delicate mixture of closure and continuation. The sensation that even when something ends, it leaves subtle traces, invisible to the eyes, but strong in the heart. And so, the republic that lasted one day does not disappear completely. It transforms into memory, into a silent legacy, waiting, perhaps, for a new chance to be born. When we contemplate the story of a republic that existed for only one day, we are invited to reflect on deep and delicate questions that go beyond the mere historical fact. This ephemerality offers us silent lessons, almost whispered, that resonate beyond the time and space of that singular moment. The first of these is courage. Courage to dream, even when the horizon seems unreachable. Courage to act, even knowing the journey will be brief and the fruits may not bloom immediately. This one-day republic reminds us that the very act of trying is, in itself, a gesture of bravery. Another lesson lies in the importance of small gestures. Not every change needs to be grand or lasting to have meaning. Sometimes, impact is found in details. In a word, in an agreement, in a simple law, in a calm meeting. The ephemeral can carry an unexpected strength. There is also reflection on the fragility of political structures. To govern is not just to exercise power. It is to build bridges between people, to create spaces of trust and respect. And when these foundations are fragile, even the smallest disturbance can create waves. This story reminds us that power is delicate and must be handled with wisdom. Moreover, we learn about human resilience. Even in the face of limitations, uncertainties, and external pressures, the will to change persists. The desire for autonomy, for voice, for belonging, can emerge in the most adverse circumstances, showing the strength of the human spirit. And finally, this story invites us to look at time differently. Not everything that matters needs to last forever. There is beauty and value in passing moments, in the present instant, in the ephemerality that makes each moment unique and precious. As you listen, let these lessons gently seep into your mind and heart. Feel the calm and depth of these truths, inviting us to live with more awareness and courage, even when everything seems fleeting. And so, the republic that lasted one day continues to exist, not only in historical records, but in the lessons it offers us, like a whisper echoing in the silence of the night. Even though its existence was brief, the republic that lasted only one day left a legacy that transcended its own time. Like a small stone cast into a calm lake, its silent ripples spread out, touching future movements for autonomy and political change that sought to give voice to the forgotten and create spaces of freedom. Imagine communities and groups, years or decades later, returning to that story as a source of inspiration. For them, that fleeting republic was more than a historical fact. It was a symbol that, even in the face of oppression and skepticism, collective will can manifest and create something new. Many social and political movements looked upon this experience with respect and curiosity, learning from its victories and its limits. The idea of experimenting, even temporarily, with alternative forms of governance became a seed that sprouted in different contexts, fueling debates about autonomy, democracy, and popular participation. Moreover, the memory of that republic served to nurture a sense of belonging, a reminder that change begins within each community, even if in modest ways. The courage of those who took on the role of leaders on that unique day continued to echo, encouraging new leaders to emerge. This influence, though discreet, shows how small and brief gestures can open paths to greater transformations. It is an invitation to value fleeting moments, for within them may lie the seeds of the future. As you listen to this story, allow yourself to imagine these silent ripples spreading through time, touching hearts and minds, and helping build a world where freedom and hope can bloom. And so, the republic that lasted one day remains alive, not in calendars, but in the soul of those who believe in the power of the moment and the shared dream. The story of the republic that lasted only one day invites us to dive into a deep reflection on the nature of time, being, and existence. How can something so brief, so fleeting, leave a mark that surpasses its own duration? How can the ephemeral paradoxically touch the eternal? Imagine, for a moment, the constant flow of life. Everything in motion, everything passing, disappearing. The rising and setting of the sun, the changing seasons, stories that begin and end. Nothing remains unchanged, and perhaps this transience is the essence of existence itself. This one-day republic is a perfect example of that paradox. A brief instant that nonetheless gains meaning and memory far beyond the time allowed. It is a silent reminder that the value of things is not always in their duration, but in the intensity with which they are lived and the impact they leave behind. Philosophically, we might think of the ephemeral as an invitation to mindfulness, to valuing the present moment. It teaches us that the moment, however fleeting, carries within it an eternity, because it is in the now that life truly happens. On the other hand, the eternal is not necessarily what lasts forever, but what remains alive in memory, in feeling, in the transformation it provokes. The Republic of One Day fits into this concept. Its existence is brief, but its meaning is immortalized in history and in the hearts of those who remember it. As you listen to this narrative, allow yourself to feel this deep calm, this connection with the natural flow of time, where the transient and the permanent intertwine. Reflect on how our own lives are made up of moments that come and go, and how each of them can be filled with meaning. And so, this story, with its brevity and depth, becomes a silent poem about life, time, and what truly matters. Although it lasted only one day, this ephemeral republic left a lasting symbol in the local culture, a landmark that, though small, came to represent something much greater than its brief existence. In the silence of traditions and collective memories, it transformed into a mirror for the aspirations, dreams, and struggles of that people. For many, the Republic became a symbol of resistance, a faint but persistent light reminding everyone that the will for autonomy and justice can survive even in the most difficult circumstances. It is a quiet reminder that the identity of a people cannot be erased, even before oppressive structures. This symbol also found its place in local festivals, oral narratives, songs, and cultural gestures that keep the flame of that experience alive. In stories told by the fireside, in community gatherings, the one-day Republic appears as a moment of unity and hope, a memory that strengthens the bonds between people. Moreover, this symbol invites reflection on the value of the collective, on how, even in small groups, joint action can create different realities, even if only for a short time. It reinforces the idea that culture is not only the preserved past but a living process, nourished by gestures, symbols, and memories. As you listen to this story, let the symbolism of that republic slowly enter your thoughts, bringing the serenity of one who understands that, often, the greatest power lies in what remains invisible yet deeply felt. And so, the Republic of One Day lives on, not in ours, but in the heart of a people who learned to cherish their own dreams and their own voice. And so, between sunrise and sunset, a republic lived. It lived as an idea, as a breath of freedom, as a reflection of desires that don't always find space in the real world. It did not withstand time, but survived in memory, like certain dreams that, though brief, never fully leave us. Perhaps you're wondering why tell a story like this. The answer might lie precisely in its strangeness, in what escapes the ordinary. Because sometimes, it is these unlikely tales that help us understand the present, and even fall asleep with our eyes more open to what the world holds. If this kind of story brought you calm, if it gently awakened your curiosity, consider supporting this space with a like and your subscription. That's what allows more stories like this, real, yet almost dreamlike, to reach you, always with care not to disturb the silence of the night. Now, close your eyes. Let this real absurdity vanish like the Republic of Kaunani, into the mist of your dreams. Good night.